It all began a few months ago, on a quiet Saturday afternoon, when I was sitting alone in my cozy new home, sipping tea and staring out the window. I had just moved in, and while it was a nice change from my old place, it felt like something was missing. My old life, my routines. Everything had been familiar, safe. But now I was here in a new town, in a new house, and everything was different. I was still adjusting. As I sat there, my phone buzzed. It was Emma, my best friend, calling to see if I needed help unpacking. We had known each other for years, and she was always there when I needed a laugh, a cup of coffee, or just someone to talk to. We chatted for a bit, and she suggested we meet later in the day to catch up. I agreed and told her about my plans to spend the evening alone, thinking maybe I'd take a walk or do some light reading. But Emma, being Emma, had other ideas. "You know what I've been thinking," she said, a little too casually. "Why not throw a little party? Not just any party. How about a gathering in your backyard, up in that treehouse of yours?" I laughed, thinking she was joking. The treehouse was old and had definitely seen better days. I mean, it had a charm to it, sure, but it wasn't exactly the safest structure. "A party in the treehouse?" I said, raising an eyebrow. "Are you serious?" She paused for a moment, probably expecting me to brush it off, but then she added, "Why not? You've got a beautiful view, a little space to make something of it, and we could invite a few close friends. You know, just a small get-together. No fuss, just fun." I had to admit, the idea had a certain appeal. I had been feeling like I needed something different, something new, something to break up the monotony of the past few weeks. The idea of a party wasn't anything too outlandish. Emma wasn't one for large crowds or loud music. She liked quiet, intimate gatherings. So I could already picture it. We'd keep it small. Few friends, some simple snacks, maybe a glass of wine or two. Nothing extravagant, just a way to enjoy a peaceful evening without feeling like we had to do something big. As we continued to talk about it, I realized that the treehouse wasn't just a random space. It was an interesting choice, something that made this idea feel unique and special. And as we discussed it further, we started to shape what could be a very memorable evening. A relaxed atmosphere, good company, and the chance to unwind. Still, part of me hesitated. Was it a good idea? Sure, the idea of being surrounded by friends and enjoying the fresh air sounded wonderful, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it might not be as easy as we thought. The treehouse wasn't exactly built for hosting people. The old ladder leading up was a bit rickety, and who knew what the state of the floorboards was? But Emma wasn't having any of my doubts. She was already talking about the guest list and planning what food we should bring. She was determined. And honestly, I was starting to warm to the idea. By the time I hung up, I was half convinced we could make it work. After all, how often do you get the chance to host a small gathering in a treehouse? And more importantly, how many people get to say they've done it? Later that evening, as I looked up at the treehouse from my backyard, I could almost picture the scene. Lights strung across the wooden beams, soft music in the background, and the familiar faces of a few friends gathered around, sharing stories and enjoying the peaceful evening. It seemed like a harmless, simple idea, but somewhere in the back of my mind, I wondered if we were underestimating how much could go wrong. But in that moment I was excited. Excited for the adventure, excited to do something different, and maybe even excited to see how something so simple could turn into something memorable. The week passed by faster than I expected. As much as I tried to keep my mind busy with the usual unpacking and settling into my new home, Emma's enthusiasm for the treehouse party only grew. She called me every day with new ideas for what to bring, how to decorate, and what kind of food we should serve. Each time we talked, I found myself getting more and more excited about it. Sure, it was an odd concept, a party in a treehouse no less, but there was something appealing about it. Something that felt like we were creating a small adventure right in the middle of the ordinary. By Friday afternoon, Emma and I were standing in the backyard, staring up at the treehouse again. This time I could see how much work we had ahead of us. The treehouse was more charming in theory than in practice. Its wood had aged and weathered over the years, and while it still looked sturdy from a distance, I wasn't entirely convinced. But Emma didn't hesitate for a second. "We're going to make this the best night ever," she said with a grin, practically bouncing with excitement. We've got everything. Food, drinks, music. All we need is a little flair. She was already pulling out some fairy lights from her bag, and before I could even ask, she was on a step stool, hanging them along the wooden beams of the treehouse. This will look perfect once it's all lit up, she said, adjusting a few strands, the lights twinkling in the evening air. I couldn't help but smile at her enthusiasm. She was right, there was a certain charm to it. If nothing else, the treehouse would look magical once the lights were in place. The soft glow against the darkening sky, the wind rustling the leaves of the tree, it had the potential to be really special. We'd planned to keep the guest list small. Just a handful of close friends who would appreciate the novelty of it all. A few neighbors we had gotten to know, a couple of our oldest friends, and, of course, Sarah, Emma's friend who was always up for any kind of adventure, no matter how crazy. She'd insisted on bringing a few extra bottles of wine, which I knew meant she was planning for things to get a little lively. As we continued to prepare, I started to feel the weight of the excitement and the responsibility. I wanted everything to go smoothly, but part of me couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something could go wrong. The old ladder, the shaky floorboards, it all seemed to be a recipe for disaster. But, at the same time, maybe that was part of the charm. Sometimes, the best memories come from moments where things don't go exactly as planned. All right, what's next? Emma asked as she stepped down from the ladder, surveying our work. We're almost ready. I looked around at the treehouse, which was now looking a little more inviting, with the fairy lights giving it a soft glow. We had blankets laid out on the floor to make it more comfortable, and the small table was set with appetizers. Cheese, crackers, fruit, and of course, some of Emma's famous dips. A few bottles of wine were chilling nearby, waiting to be opened. Music, I said, thinking out loud. We can't forget music. I dug around in the trunk of my car and pulled out the old portable speaker I had from college. Emma looked at me and raised an eyebrow. Vintage, huh, she teased. It'll work, I shrugged, setting it up on a small ledge inside the treehouse. I wasn't sure what we'd be listening to yet, but I figured we'd just go with whatever felt right at the time. The air felt warm, and the sky was beginning to turn that soft, dusky purple. The treehouse had a beautiful view, and I could already imagine the group sitting together, chatting and laughing, enjoying the evening. It wasn't going to be anything wild, just good friends, good conversation, and the kind of calm that made everything feel easier. I think we're ready, Emma said, surveying the scene. A few more touches here and there, and then the magic happens. As the evening went on, we got everything into place. The food was laid out, drinks were ready, and the music was softly playing. I started to feel better about the whole thing, and before long our guests started arriving. It was a small group, which was exactly what we needed. No loud crowds, just a few people who were there to enjoy the night and the unique atmosphere of the treehouse. Sarah was the first to show up, and she couldn't help but laugh when she saw the setup. You actually went through with this, she asked, shaking her head in disbelief. A treehouse party. You guys are nuts. Welcome to our little slice of crazy, I replied with a grin. I had to admit, there was something thrilling about doing something so unexpected. As more people trickled in, the vibe lightened, and the laughter started to fill the air. It wasn't long before everyone was settled in, drinks in hand, chatting and catching up. The treehouse, despite its age and slight creaks, was holding up. The night was peaceful, the breeze cool against our skin, and for a moment, I felt like we were in our own little world, far away from everything else. There was something magical about being so high up, surrounded by the trees and the soft light. But as the evening wore on, I couldn't shake the feeling that the treehouse wasn't as sturdy as it seemed. Each creak of the floorboards seemed a little louder, and I noticed some of our guests were looking around a little nervously. But they were all enjoying themselves too much to care. There was something about the novelty of it all that made us all forget the potential dangers. After all, what could go wrong? The evening was unfolding perfectly. The soft hum of the music mixed with the laughter of our friends, and the treehouse, now lit by fairy lights, felt like a magical little world tucked away in the branches. Drinks were flowing and conversation was easy. No one was in a hurry. The vibe was calm, relaxed, but still filled with that spark of excitement you get when you're doing something out of the ordinary. I noticed a few of our guests starting to settle in, some curled up on the cushions, others leaning over the edge to take in the view of the yard below. There was something wonderfully peaceful about being so high up, surrounded by the quiet rustling of the leaves, the cool breeze, and the warmth of good company. Emma was the first to get up and start joking with people, leading a bit of a game. It was something simple, a light-hearted icebreaker, nothing too daring. But the laughs, the gentle teasing, and the clinking of glasses made it feel like the night was unfolding in exactly the way we'd hoped. The atmosphere felt just right. People were leaning back, comfortable, enjoying the moment. Even Sarah, who'd been the most skeptical of all, seemed to be letting go, her laughter echoing through the treehouse. It was like everyone was on the same page, having fun, sharing stories, and feeling that sense of freedom you don't get every day. But then, just as the evening was starting to feel too perfect, I noticed something odd. The treehouse, our beautiful little retreat, suddenly creaked louder than usual. I froze for a moment, glancing around. A few people shifted in their seats, looking uncertain. The sound of creaking would echoed through the small space again, this time louder and more ominous. I tried to shrug it off. It was probably nothing, just the house settling. But then I saw Emma's face flicker with concern. "Did you hear that?" she asked, her voice dropping slightly. "I think we might be pushing our luck with this place." Just as she spoke, there was a louder snap. I felt the whole structure shudder beneath us, and my stomach dropped. That wasn't just the wind or the tree swaying. That was the sound of something giving way. Before anyone could react, the treehouse lurched to one side. I heard gasps, followed by a loud crack, and then the entire platform tilted sharply. The room seemed to spin, and I could feel the ground pulling away beneath me. "Everyone, hold on!" I shouted, but it was too late. In a split second, the floor beneath us buckled, and the next thing I knew, I was tumbling. I don't even remember how it happened. One second I was standing there laughing with Sarah, and the next I was falling. The world spun in a blur of wood, light, and shouts. There was the sound of crashing wood, and then thud. We hit the ground, all of us in various positions, a tangled mess of limbs and confusion. I tried to push myself up, my heart pounding, my body aching from the impact. I could hear others groaning, but to my surprise, no one was seriously hurt. It wasn't graceful, and it definitely wasn't how I had imagined the night going, but somehow the treehouse had given way, bringing our wild idea to a crashing halt. I pulled myself to my feet, wincing as I felt the soreness in my body. Around me, everyone else was slowly getting up, shaking off the shock. The treehouse, what was left of it, was now nothing more than a pile of broken wood and scattered cushions. I couldn't help but laugh, even though I knew it was the most ridiculous thing that had happened all night. "Well," Emma said, brushing dirt off her shirt as she stood up with a wince, "I guess we should have built a sturdier treehouse, huh?" I couldn't help but laugh again, the sound mixed with the groans of the others. Who thought a treehouse was a good idea for a party anyway? The rest of our friends were slowly standing up, laughing nervously, some still shaking off the shock. Despite the chaos, no one seemed seriously hurt. There were a few bumps and bruises, and a couple of scrapes, but we had all made it through the fall unscathed. I glanced around, noticing the looks of disbelief on everyone's faces. The first wave of shock had passed, but now came the reality check. The night had gone from being this beautiful, spontaneous adventure to a bit of a disaster. "That was not part of the plan," Sarah said, rubbing her arm where she'd landed. "No kidding," Sam added, trying to straighten his glasses, his expression a mix of amusement and discomfort. "I guess this is what happens when you get too creative with your ideas." The laughter was still there, but now it had a tinge of discomfort. We had been so focused on the fun, the newness of the idea, and how perfect it all seemed, that we hadn't thought about what could go wrong. And now, in the aftermath, it was clear that things hadn't gone quite the way we'd imagined. The laughter slowly faded into awkward silence as we all surveyed the wreckage. What had started as a fun, spontaneous idea now felt like an accident waiting to happen. We were sitting or standing around in various degrees of discomfort, our bodies sore from the fall, our nerves still on edge. Some people were checking themselves for cuts, others were rubbing sore spots where they had landed hard. I took a deep breath and stood up straight, brushing off my jeans as I looked at the pile of splintered wood that used to be our beautiful treehouse. I could hardly believe it. A few hours ago we had been sitting in there, laughing, enjoying the view, and now it was all in ruins. And yet, no one seemed to be seriously hurt, which was the only good news in this whole mess. Well, that's one way to make an impression, Emma said, looking around at the group, her voice dry but somehow still trying to lighten the mood. I couldn't help but chuckle, even though the whole situation felt surreal. I guessed the worst swing party ever has a whole new meaning now. Everyone started laughing, albeit nervously. It was like we were all trying to cope with the sheer absurdity of what had just happened. Here we were, all gathered in the backyard, nursing bruises and scratches, our once perfect treehouse reduced to a pile of broken boards and fallen cushions. Sarah winced as she stood up, stretching her back carefully. Honestly, I thought this was going to be fun. But now I feel like I need a chiropractor. I could see the traces of laughter still lingering on her face, but it was clear that the night hadn't gone the way anyone had expected. What was supposed to be an intimate gathering with friends had turned into a scene from a disaster movie. And as we all gathered together looking at the mess around us, it was hard to deny that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't the best idea after all. That was something, Sam said, his voice still a little shaky as he adjusted his glasses and took a cautious step toward the wreckage. Not quite the swing party I envisioned. A few others agreed, and the realization slowly dawned on us that, while the night had started with excitement and anticipation, it had quickly spiraled into something entirely different. I honestly can't believe this happened, Emma said, her tone softer now. She sat on a nearby bench, rubbing her sore arm. We had this grand idea, and it didn't quite work out. We all fell into a quiet moment, each of us reflecting on the ridiculousness of what had just transpired. There was no need to say it aloud, we all felt the same. What had seemed like a harmless idea, a way to do something different and break away from the usual routine, had turned into an unfortunate accident. I'm really sorry, guys, I said, finally breaking the silence. I wasn't sure if I was apologizing for the idea itself or for the disaster that followed, but it felt like the right thing to say. I never thought the treehouse would actually fall down. Emma shrugged and gave me a tired smile. It's not your fault. We all agreed on this. Who knew it would end like this? The group nodded in agreement, and for a moment, there was a sense of camaraderie in the air. We had all taken a risk, and while it hadn't paid off in the way we'd hoped, we had still shared something unique. A night none of us would ever forget. As the night wound down, we slowly started to gather our things, still laughing in between groans of discomfort. The party was definitely over, but we couldn't help but find humor in the situation. At the very least, we had something to talk about for years to come. Well, at least we didn't have to worry about that treehouse being in our way anymore, Sarah joked, and the rest of us burst out laughing. I don't know about you guys, but I think next time we'll stick to a nice, safe backyard barbecue, I said, wincing as I adjusted my shoulder. Maybe something without ladders or rotting wood. Everyone laughed again, though I could tell we were all secretly relieved to finally be heading inside. The fall had been unexpected, but somehow it made the night even more memorable, if not in the way we'd originally planned. As I closed the door behind me, I felt the weight of the evening's chaos settle into a quiet realization. The treehouse, as charming as it was, had never been built for a gathering of this size. It wasn't meant to hold people for long periods, and certainly not for a party. Maybe next time we'd keep it simple, stick to something safe. But one thing was certain. This was an evening I would never forget.